Now, if we believe this truth, it changes who you are. The first thought that came to my mind when the doctor said cancer was, God, may it not be, may it be a mistake. The next day they came back and they said, no, this is not a mistake. This is cancer. We got to see how bad it is. They came back to me. They said it's at least stage 3. They came back on Friday. They said this is stage 4. 18 months to 24 months, 4% chance of survival. And the first thing I did when I went home was pray. God, do I really know that this is true? And thankfully, I had been through the struggling, the testing, the searching, and the looking already. Thankfully, I believe my feet are planted on the rock. And I know that death has no sting. That doesn't mean I don't want to live. I do want to live. My parents didn't come to my wedding. After I became a Christian, they didn't want to come to my wedding. And my one dream was to be there for my daughter, to dance at her wedding. I believe I will be there, despite what the doctors say. Because I know my God, and He's a healer, and He does miracles even today. And I believe even if I die, He can still raise me. And if He doesn't raise me right away, He will when it counts most. Any of the issues you're dealing with, I don't know what they are. I'm not saying they're pointless or they're small. I'm not comparing them to what I'm dealing with. You could be dealing with something way worse. Whatever your issue is, it can and will, just as the song we sang, be defeated in Christ because Christ is greater. That is the real truth, not this truth. The real truth is this world has already been overcome. It's not just something we tell ourselves. It is the truth. And I pray for your sake and for the sake of everyone you ever encounter that your feet are firmly planted on the rock. Hey, listen, guys, we're going to do a Q&A. And I know this is not normal, but we have a microphone set up over here. Come one, come all to ask whatever questions you might have. I will answer every question that is not dumb. No, there's no such thing as dumb questions, only dumb people. So come on and ask whatever it is you want to ask. And what we will do is, as people are lining up to ask questions, if you don't want to ask any questions, fine, I can preach another sermon. But if we have questions, just one person at a time, and then you can line up and we can just go and get through as many as we can before we call it quits. Howdy.
Hi. Is it on? We good?
It's on.
Okay. Hi, my name is... I've actually read your book and just wanted to say that was very integral in my own conversion to Christianity. So
Praise God.
Thank you so much. So my question to you is actually a little personal, I guess for both of us, but I haven't been a Christian for even a year yet. It's still very new to me. And I still haven't told my father, who is Muslim. And I was really just wondering, how did you get past that feeling of guilt that you know that it's going to hurt the people that you love the most in order to tell them? How did you get from feeling that to just trusting God completely with it so that you could say what needed to be said, even though that you knew it was going to hurt?
Sister, I love you, and many, many people here love you, and I don't doubt that many people will come around you and help you walk through this. And if you don't, by the way, you're heartless. So some people need to come around you and walk through this with you. My answer will not make you happy. I didn't. I couldn't figure out how to tell them. So my friend David, I told him, I said, David, I believe I want to be baptized. And he said, great, awesome, we'll baptize you. Have you told your parents? And I was like, no. And he's like, a baptism is a public proclamation of faith. You haven't publicly proclaimed your faith if you don't tell your parents. So I'm not going to baptize you till you tell your parents. And I was like, what part of you're going to baptize me didn't you hear? You're going to baptize me, and I'm not going to tell my parents. And he's like, all right, fine. I will pray to my dad, which that's what he called Father. I'll pray to my dad to make sure your parents find out before I baptize you. Thanks, David. My parents, through a series of coincidences, and I'll leave it at that for now, found out without me telling them. If there is one thing I could take back in the past 11 years, it's that moment. They deserved to know, and they deserved it to come from me, for me to be the one to tell them. It's going to suck. It's going to be rough. It's going to be probably one of the roughest things that ever happens to you in your life. So you're going to need people around you to help you walk through that. But it needs to happen, and here's why. The Christian faith, and I'm not going to just juxtapose Islam to Christianity. I'm just going to say that the Christian faith is meant to be lived in the light. The more you walk in the light, the more that people see what you're going through, the more that you are transparent and vulnerable and have no vestige of yourself hidden, the more you will walk in truth and in power. And that's the primary reason why as many guys are addicted to pornography as they are, because they're afraid to walk in the light. It's the primary reason why girls will often find themselves having body issues, many people being willing to cut, because they're not walking in the light. The Bible is so explicit that this world, it will just rip into you. And the way to release yourself of that shackle is to walk in the light. So no hiding. And certain lifestyles, certain worldviews lend themselves to sneaking around corners and not letting people know certain things and dating people when your parents didn't realize it and having this kind of guilt within you. And none of that anymore. I'm not saying that that's what you were doing, but none of that anymore. You walk in the light. Talk to your parents. Make sure you're safe. And by the way, people didn't used to have that luxury. And some people in parts of the world today don't have that luxury to be safe when they tell their parents. But I think you should do the best to make sure that you're safe. I'm not saying your father's a murderous type, but he could be. I have a friend who became a Christian, and her father said he was going to kill her, and she had to run away from home. Make sure you're safe. But tell them, and tell them soon, and be honest, and let the storms come. Because what's going to happen when you suffer in this way is exactly what Mark 10:29 says. Now go, when you get a chance, and memorize Mark 10:29, and memorize Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 to 35. If it's not those verses exactly, you'll see what I'm talking about. But Mark 10:29 says this: he who gives up, and that also means she who gives up, father or mother or brother or sister or crops and fields for the sake of the gospel will not fail to receive 10, 30, or many hundreds of times over a reward. The promise of God, and this is why it matters so much, folks, that you actually believe and know that you believe, and believe. Not just say you believe and make yourself think you believe, but actually believe the promise of God here. He says he will reward you many, many times over for the loss that comes. And he will. And he has me. And at the same time, when you're walking through that difficult, and this applies to everyone, by the way, as well. When you're walking through a difficult time that causes you to rely upon God, that connects you so much closer to him than you otherwise would be. And that makes you walk in power. That makes you live a life that's insuperable. So it will suck. It will. But it will be perhaps one of the best things you ever do. Over time, if you keep your eyes on the Lord, walk with a community of people around you, walk in the light, be steeped in the Word. My advice for you, if you read the old version of my book, which it sounds like you did, then you wouldn't have gotten the advice that has come out in the new version. So in the appendix, I have advice specifically for you on this question. So Seeking All, Finding Jesus, the one that has the medal on the cover, that one. Read that, and there's specific advice for you there. I love you, sister.
Thank you so much.
Mine's kind of like a two-part question that kind of goes together. But I guess, so to start off, how would you kind of explain logically that for someone who's going to say that absolute truths can exist like in the physical world but not in the spiritual world?
You ask them first to substantiate that. Anytime anyone makes any claim, you ask them to substantiate. Christians have this horrible mistake that they make where they're always on the back foot. Like they have to defend everything. No, anybody who says anything and asserts anything needs to be able to defend that assertion. So if someone says, well, in the physical world, the truths are one way, but in the spiritual world, they're another, say, why? But go ahead.
Yes. Actually, I kind of missed that like last 10 seconds because I started listening to something that was going on over here. So we'll get to that later.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know, man. When you say why, I was like, oh crap, he stopped talking.
No, it's all
Am I
right.
supposed to say something?
No, it's worth reiterating. When somebody says something to you, ask them, and they're asserting a truth, ask them why that's true.
Gotcha.
So if they say the spiritual world is different from the physical world, ask them why. Okay. And this is a big issue. People will say, well, what God you believe in is different from the issue of 2 + 2 = 4. No, it's the same. Truth is truth. If there's a universe that was created by a God, there's a universe that's created by a God. Who is that God? Yeah. It's not like, it's not like ice cream. The spiritual realm is ice cream flavors where you can just pick what you like. There's no reason to think that. And the spiritual physical dichotomy, by the way, I think is a bit of a misleading one as well. Yeah. If this universe was created by a force, by a being, whatever you call it, it was created by a force, a being, whatever you call it. What is that? It's not a dichotomous question. Well, that's spiritual and that's physical. No, it's all interrelated. But go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, and going along with that, it's like the absolute idea that there's one God, but oftentimes you'll get this, well, everybody has the same God. This God kind of tells them to do different things.
Okay, so our God is a father. The Christian God is a father. The Muslim God is not. Specifically denies being a father. Multiple times in the Quran. The Christian God loves everyone. He is love. He exists as love. The Muslim God, chapter 60, verse 1 of the Quran says, do not love my enemies. Don't love those that I don't love. He doesn't love them. It makes a difference if God is a God of love or not. Trust me, that makes a huge difference. These aren't incidental issues. There's so much more to talk about, but I mean, just this kind of relativistic nonsense is demeaning to everyone except the relativist. Because then you say to the Muslim, well, your God is the same as a Christian God. And the conservative Muslim will say, what are you talking? That's hogwash. My God is not a man who would come into this world and who would suffer on a cross. My God's way greater than that. That's what a Muslim would say. Yeah. And you talk to a Christian, you say, well, all gods are the same. What are you talking about? My God is one who's willing to bear my sins. Your God is not. So it's nonsense. It all sounds good until you dig even a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi. Thank you for your testimony. So the question I had was, could you give us just a little bit of information comparing the nature and person of God in Christianity and Islam with respect to our relationship with God?
So the Quran does not imply any sort of relationship between Allah and his people. Let me explain what I mean by that. The praxis is the fundamental issue. You're supposed to be as a slave before his master. That's, by the way, why Abdullah is such a common name amongst Muslims. Abdullah means slave of Allah. And you're supposed to do what he says. You're just supposed to submit to Allah. That's what the word Muslim means, one who submits. That's what the word Islam means, submission. Just submit and do what he says. That is the crux of the Quranic theology. Now, a lot of Muslims, such as myself, were taught that Allah loves you. I was taught that growing up. Allah loves you. Said nowhere in the Quran. In fact, there's a verse that says the Christians and the Jews say Allah is a father and loves them. Why do they say this? They are but one of his creations. So, intimacy. Let me use that term. There is no implication in the Quran that Muslims are designed to have intimacy with Allah. Whereas the Christian God, okay, mind-blowing truths here for those of you who are like, I came for a Bible study. Mind-blowing truth here. John chapter 1, En arche ein halagas, kai halagas ein prastanta an, kai theos ein halagas. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What? The Word was with God and he was. How can he be with God if he is God? Right? Like, what's going on here? Here's the Trinity in a nutshell. There is one God. You need to get this straight if you don't understand the Trinity. There is one God, one being, one what? He is God. But within that one God, there are three persons. Father, Son, and Spirit. There are three who's in that one what. Let me put that another way. a being, and God is one being, a being is that what makes you what you are. So what am I? I'm a human being. That's what I am. A person is that which makes you who you are. Who am I? If someone said, "Who are you?" and I said, "A human being," I've answered the wrong question. If someone says, "Who are you?" and I say, "Nabeel," I've answered the right question, because who I am is my person. If someone says, "What are you?" and I say, "Nabeel," that's the wrong answer. What I am is a human being. So the what that God is one being. He's one being, Yahweh. But who he is three persons. There's three who's in that one what, Father, Son, and Spirit. Here's what that means. All right, this is the take-home message of this. This blew my mind when I found this out, which was last year, around February. Because God exists eternally, right? God exists eternally. Can we see some nods? You guys are thinking, when is this going to be over? Soon. If one God exists eternally, but he's three persons, that means community has always existed. That means selfless love between multiple persons has always existed. That means the universe is younger than love. That means love is eternal, and it was out of love that God created this universe, because there's three persons who love each other, and out of that relationship springs forth this universe. That is why this universe is built on the foundation of love, the principle of love. When you want something to grow, what do you got to do? You got to love it. When you want to care for a relationship with someone, you got to love them. When you're invested in something, you got to love it. It seems like love permeates us as people and permeates this universe, and that is because our God is triune, and love is eternal because he is triune. If God were not triune, like Islam teaches, then love is not eternal. Love only exists when there's persons to love one another. This has tremendous ramifications for who we are amongst each other and who we are before God. This, by the way, is why Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These two are the greatest commandment." Why? Love and love, the greatest commandment. Why? Because God is love. And he's only love because he's triune. The theology makes a tremendous difference.